Okay, we can't go. Go, don't go. Ooh. Is my team all here? Yeah, we've got Alyssa. Where's Lauren? Doing things, making it happen. We've got Crow's team. We've got everybody. People will trickle in, and that's okay. Seth's here. Oh, we can go now. Seth's here. If you're late, I make a joke. Okay. Should we get started? Yes. Are we excited? You guys are the funnest part of this process. So thank you for showing up tonight. My name is Jessica Savage. I'm seeing a lot of familiar faces. So you saw me back in July here in this very room. And I work for the Vermont Council on Rural Development. I just want to start by thanking you for taking time on this lovely September evening to come sit in a school gym. And it's really can only happen if you show up. So thank you so, so much. I also want to thank the Community Oven folks for making the pizza tonight. Yay! Mark and Jasmine and the whole crew, really, it's amazing and delicious. And what an asset in your community to see that smoke coming out of that today. It was pretty exciting and special for me. And I also want to thank David. Are you here? David? The principal, David? No, he's running around probably. And Rainey, they have been so helpful in all the logistics for setting up these meetings. So I just wanted to thank them, as well as our CCTV partners here. Maya, we're live streaming this, and your colleague over there, which is really great. I'll pretend there aren't cameras on me because I hate that, but it's really nice for accessibility. It's not going to be interactive, but people are going to be able to watch this, and then you'll have a recording of this for posterity. Who am I? I work for the Vermont Council on Rural Development. I'm joined tonight by my colleagues, Alyssa and Lauren. Yay! And they are superstar champs, really. We have a staff person who would normally be here, Laura Cavan-Bailey, and she's unfortunately sick, so they really had to step it up and do a ton of packing and prep. So thank you so much to my colleagues. I'm also joined by our partners tonight, the Community Resilience Organization crew, Lena, Jess, and Mindy. And you'll hear from them soon, and they'll do a more complete introduction of who they are in their organization. But VCRD, or the Vermont Council on Rural Development, we're a neutral facilitator and a convener of public processes. We're one of several rural development councils across the country charged with supporting rural communities in our state. And we do that through often a community engagement process. We work when invited, and in this case we were invited by the select board. And once we're engaged, we work for the entire community. So we're here to hold the container, and you're here to fill it. Because we don't know what Johnson needs. You do, right? And so I just wanted to start by reintroducing this process. The Reimagine Johnson process is a community engagement and planning process that's meant to be a long-term recovery plan for Johnson. So post-flooding, what does Johnson want to do to reimagine itself to both recover, to be more resilient, and to really be the place that everybody has a vision for? And in our first meeting, you might recall we did a little bit of crowdsourcing for ideas for points of vision. We're going to revisit these at the next meeting and finalize them, but I just wanted to read a few to kind of ground us in what you all see as the future for your community. So a few that really stood out to me, and there's a long, long list here. It says needs editing at the top. It does, and you're going to edit it at the next meeting. So one of these points of vision that really stood out to me was Johnson is an intergenerational, supportive, and welcoming community to all. Another is Johnson is a place where residents of different mindsets can get together and have fun together, be creative, and communicate. Another is Johnson is thriving and has a strong community and a downtown area that is functional. And then the one that I really circled, because I'm like, yeah, this is the mood that we want to set tonight, is it's a place where residents with different mindsets, oh wait, I already read this one. I'm going to say it again because it's the best ender, I think. A place where residents with different mindsets can get together, have fun, be creative, and communicate. And that's what we're going to do tonight. So regardless of your opinion of the different priorities we're going to discuss tonight, your mindset, whatever, this is really about coming together and reimagining Johnson, right, as a community, and about hearing each other's thoughts and where you want to put energy. Okay? So that's who we are in a little introduction to the mood for the evening. So now let's talk about the sort of where we find ourselves. We're in step 2 of a 3-part plus process. It began back in the spring when we were invited by the select board and when we started talking to Johnson residents about what Johnson wanted to talk about as you reimagined yourself, as you thought about long-term recovery. And then we had our first meeting back in July. Some of you were here. We opened the aperture wide. We opened the brainstorming conversation. We thought about, what do you really want to do? What should we do about the challenges and opportunities that Johnson is facing right now? We also had forum discussions in the format of a community resilience assessment, and Crows facilitated those forums, and we got a lot of ideas about how people are feeling about different aspects of what makes your community resilient, right? And we're going to hear about those results tonight. So at the end of that meeting, what we did is we kept our ears open, right? We had a survey, we had an online survey, we had paper copies of the survey, we had an online version of the community resilience assessment, we had paper copies of the community resilience assessment, and we kept getting people's input because not everybody could be here, or maybe after the event you thought of something else you wanted to contribute. Overall, we've heard from just about 200 people in Johnson and gathered all their thoughts and ideas. Once we closed out those 2 ways of hearing from people, we then looked at pages and pages and pages of notes, and we culled those notes for themes. Where are we seeing energy and attention and common ideas for action, right? And so that's what we're going to do tonight. We're going to look at those common ideas for action. You're seeing them on the wall. We have bigger descriptions of these themes that we're all going to read together, so don't worry if you are squinting to read like I do when I'm far away from things these days. We're going to collectively read all these ideas for action. We're also going to hear about the results of the community resilience assessment as another way of sort of getting our minds ready to think about what is most important for Johnson to focus on. And Crows is going to facilitate that part of the agenda. So at the end of tonight, what we're going to do is basically we're going to vote twice. We're going to vote on, out of all this big long list of ideas, we're going to get down to 10, then we're going to get down to 5. So by the end of the night, we'll have 5 big areas, I think, that Johnson feels you all should focus on. And you should focus on these things because they will assist in long-term recovery, in resilience, and in reimagining your future, right? And aligning with your vision for this community. After that, we're going to set out, even tonight, we'll have task force lists, committee lists. So if one of these ideas or more, if you're feeling, I don't know, really, like you need more things to do, you could sign up for a couple of committees, I suppose. So we're going to ask people to sign up that you're interested in getting involved and helping take these actions further down the field. We're gonna send that out to the community too. We'll let everybody know these were the top 5 ideas voted on tonight, and we'll say, do you want to get involved? Sign up, be part of this task force. And then we'll come back together in October, on October 9th. Is that the right date? I keep switching. It's 9/10 and then 10/9, so I keep feeling like, is it right? But I think it's right. So we'll come back together in October, and we'll have our resource meeting. So you might remember in the first step, we brought a visiting team with us. There were a lot of people not from Johnson who had resources and were kind of reflecting on what they were hearing. tonight, they're not here. This is about you. This is about the community's voice and what you want to focus on. At the next meeting, we will invite resource partners back, customized to the ideas that you prioritized tonight. So we'll have resource team members. It'll basically be the first meeting of those committees, right? What are the things that those committees need to do to make progress on these actions? And then what are the first steps that they need to take? And then you'll have resource team members there giving you thoughts and ideas for how you could take things further down the field. And when I talked about this overall process, I said it's a 3-step plus process because in this instance, if you want it, and I hope you do, there is ongoing support for these priorities that you choose tonight. So there will be support from VCRD, from FEMA, from others to ensure over the next several years that you have the resources you need to implement the ideas that you surface here. And this is fairly unique. I've been working in community development for a long time, so we hope that you take advantage of this opportunity to get the supportive, the support that you might need to take things further over the next several years. Because you can't, it's just an opportunity. So we hope you take advantage of it. Okay? So that's the overall process, but we find ourselves here at step 2, right? 1, 2, 3 plus. We're at step 2. And so tonight, I'm just going to run through the agenda, and then I'm going to hand it over to my colleagues over there at Crows. So what we're going to do tonight is we're already at the overview. We're going to spend about 45 minutes, an hour going over the community resilience assessment results and having a discussion about them. There's a fun activity they're going to do with you, so keep those Post-its handy that you find on your chairs. And then at 6:45, they'll hand it back over to VCRD. We'll review the action ideas. We're going to do a group read. So clear your throats, have some water. We're going to read them all. We want to make sure everybody has a chance to thoroughly hear these ideas. And then we'll ask you, is anything missing? Did we get anything wrong? Did we call something the wrong name? Or, is there any mistakes or any additional ideas that you really want to put on the list? And then we'll have our first round of voting. We'll give you some dots. You get to vote. We will be taking all of the things that you see on the wall into the other room to count. You can watch us. It's not a private vote. It's just we need a table, and that's where the table is. But we're going to go count and come back to you with a whittled down list, 10 ideas for action. And those 10 ideas are really, all you're doing in that first round is saying, I want to talk about this one more. I want to discuss this more. I want to dive deeper on this. I want to champion this idea. So it's not saying the other ideas aren't important. And in fact, no idea is going anywhere, right? We're capturing all of this. We've got some reports on the table over there. You're going to get a big report, a big plan that's going to capture everything, including all the ideas that don't make the cut tonight, right? And nothing's stopping anybody from taking action on those ideas. This is really about getting down to the top 10, discussing, championing the ideas that you think are most important for Johnson to focus on. Then we'll do a second round of voting, get it down to 5. We'll reveal those results to you. We'll go in the other room, count. You'll talk, you'll eat some dessert. We'll come back and tell you, we'll reveal the top 5 ideas, and then we'll ask you to sign up for task forces and send you on your way. Okay, so I've kind of gone over this process twice now. Before I hand it over to Crows, are there any questions about the process or our agenda tonight? No, okay, wonderful. Okay, are we ready to get started? Wonderful, thank you. And here they come. Here they come, walking down the street. Here we go. Would you like, I know, I'm not that old, but I used to love Nick at Night, so. Who would like the microphone? You don't have to take it right away. Do you want the microphone? You're starting? Yeah. Okay. There you go. There's also a mic you can run with here.
Hi all. I'm actually loving this experience of seeing familiar faces just from being here in July. As people trickled in, I was like, we're coming to the same meeting. I'm starting to recognize people, and I don't even live here. My name is Jess. Oh, okay, good to know. My name is Jess. I identify with she, her pronouns. I was born and raised in Lamoille County, spent a lot of time away from Vermont, and I am a co-director of community resilience organizations. And after coming back to Vermont, I was really curious as a young person here about how to build stronger community for myself. I know I centered a lot of that for myself around finding other Black women and other people of color to connect with. But I think it's a pretty common experience of people who live here in Vermont looking for connection and community. And here tonight we have a portion of the Johnson community. And being a young person here, I fell into organizing. And organizing in the form of speaking up for social justice issues, thinking about the experiences of people in my community. And that ultimately led me to community resilience organizations. Our organization, which Lena will, oh, you just literally hit the screen. It's like actually a touch screen. And then, oh wait, hang on. I got it earlier. I was very proud of myself. I'm an elder millennial. No. We'll figure it out. But Community Resilience Organizations was born after Hurricane Irene, and some of the community energy, actually similar to a process like this, the presence of the town being involved, people from the community from different sectors, and asking, why was it that some communities recovered faster or in a more with more longevity than other communities? And it wasn't always just about money, right? It was like, where did people feel cared for? Might have actually been some of the towns that were the worst hit. And out of that came this idea of community resilience teams. And I honestly think that it's this kind of model and this growth, that helped VCRD to think how could we partner on this process? And I know for those of you who were here in July, you went through the community resilience assessment. And that resilience assessment was born and reiterated over and over and over again by these community-based groups, thinking about what are the different areas of resilience. Oh, I think I know the answer. Yeah. I think this is what I did last time. Just that screen, hit the black thing. And so I know that going through the community resilience assessment, and each of you chose 2 forums to be a part of that were here last time, is actually interesting because the folks who picked up the assessment or maybe found it online after had a little bit more of the global picture experience of filling it out. And that assessment, as we warned everyone, isn't necessarily about describing where we are now, but it is about setting out vision for what resilience looks like. Reading through your responses was really interesting. So for those of you who remember, you filled out, there were 4 sections: basic needs and services, environment and natural systems, physical infrastructure, and community connection. And actually, coming out of the pandemic in 2020, community resilience organizations added an additional section that was kind of about mutual aid and what we do when there are these disruptions in our community, and just having people reflect, did your community start new services, change existing services, things like that. And you all were rating resilience on a scale of 1 to 5. And it was such an interesting experience to read your comments in those assessments about why you rated something the way that you did. Many of you rated things on completely different ends of the scale, but wrote the same comment, which I noticed over and over and over again. It's like, well, we have this, but not that. And then you have the cup half full people who were like, yeah, we're a 4. And then you have the cup a little less full people who are like, we're at a 1. If I really think about it, we're at a 1. And something that I appreciate about that is this assessment surfaces our perception. It's not, we didn't do a mapping of all the resources in your town. We didn't do like a database that you can all go search in the future. Tools that could be really interesting or useful, maybe something you choose to do. But what it really was about perception. And as somebody who grew up in Vermont and moved back to Vermont, I have a little bit more of a soft spot for those of us who move into communities in Vermont now. I literally just moved to Washington County, literally neighboring the county I grew up in, and having the experience of trying to meet people around me, get involved in my community, and be a part of change, it really struck me as challenging. And we actually heard that from you all. So tonight, part of what we're gonna look at are the results of the assessment. But I think something that we really want you all to think about is about how you're involved in your community, how more people get involved and stay involved in your community changing over time. Who here has been here for more than 10 years? So I would say that most of the people in this audience know how much Johnson has changed in the last 10 years. And if you actually think about this invitation from VCRD, reflect on some of the vision of resilience that is in the community resilience assessment, but is actually in the ideas that you all have for your community, I just really want to emphasize about thinking about how you're involved in your community changing. And one thing we heard from you all was that there are some of the same people who come time and time again, and maybe a lot of you are in this room tonight. And a question I have for you is, how would somebody new get involved and stay involved as we think about really big picture ideas that you all have and some of the stuff that came out of the assessment? So without further ado, I'll hand the mic over to Lena, my other co-director at Crows, to introduce themselves. Are you trying to, is it not advancing? Okay. Okay, great.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Glad to be here with you. Jess gave a pretty robust intro to Crows. I'm Lena Greenberg. I use they, them pronouns. And I want to draw our attention to some of the nuance. There's so much information floating around and in our minds and in our community when we talk about how we want to change a place. There's so much technical knowledge we could have. There's so much lived experience that we all bring. And what I really want to get us thinking about is what is not just good for our community, not just good for Johnson, but also increasing resilience in a really tangible way. There's so many things we can do. There are so many needs that we could meet that aren't going to make an impact on the resilience at all. So we'll get there in a minute. I have a little cheat version of our there it is. Okay. So when we were last here, we defined resilience as the positive ability of a community to adapt to, address, and recover from the consequences of a catastrophic disruption. So this is not just meeting needs. This is really saying hard stuff happens. How are we going to respond to it in a way that makes it hurt less the next time? How are we going to respond in a way that actually changes the material impact for people who are living through that disruption? And I know that flooding is obviously front of mind for folks in Johnson as well as everywhere else in our state. We also have winter storms that take out power lines that make it impossible to get where you need to go. That's a pretty catastrophic disruption depending on the storm. We also know that wildfire smoke rolls in from the west and from Canada and makes it dangerous to be outside, which then jeopardizes recreation, which is a part of our economy. There's so many ways that we can interrupt the flow of life and all the things that make it possible for a community to thrive. There's obviously stuff like the COVID pandemic, or I live in Burlington, our high school is full of toxic poison, and we can't send kids there. That's a pretty huge disruption to a community. So if we think about the broad scope, we really have to ask, what can we do that doesn't just give the kids a place to go to school in the Macy's? That doesn't really increase our resilience. So if you'll bring me to the next slide. here's a little taste of what I'm talking about, and we'll get in just a couple minutes. It will not be me telling you what I think increases resilience. It will be all of you saying, here's what we think is going to make a big difference in this regard. So say we're writing a housing plan for Johnson, and maybe we want to build some new housing downtown. Has this come up? Maybe a little new housing downtown. How about refurbishing some old single-family housing? Anyone thinking about this? Cool. And then another thing we could do is build a mix of small apartments and single-family homes, not downtown. Options. They're all options. All of them create housing, which we need. Next slide. So, wow, the colors on this screen are wild. That middle one is yellow, I promise. So I took a liberty, and I thought, okay, building new housing downtown is great, but it also will put people in the path of disaster if we've got another big flood, which will negatively impact the resilience of this community as a whole. So while we're creating something that is needed, we're also then creating a problem we have to fix later. If we're refurbishing single-family housing uphill, that will improve the housing quality. It might even bring more units online for folks to live in. Might make our housing more resilient, but it doesn't necessarily house a lot more people and make a huge impact on the number of units that are available. So then if we think about something like building a mix of small apartments and single-family homes uphill, then we're getting a little bit of each of the things that we would need to really make the housing in Johnson more resilient to, say a couple of people lose their homes in another flood, and then there's new units that they can move into. I've heard from folks across the state that part of why this year's flooding was so horrible is that there was nowhere for people to go. Even if they could pay, even if they could rent another apartment, there was no apartment to rent. So thinking really about not just are we addressing a housing crisis, but are we doing so in a way that builds resilience and gives us options? Because we know that the grand scheme of disruption we could experience is pretty broad, could be anything, which is terrifying. And also, when we get together and talk about the things we can do to build that resilience, we're a lot more prepared. Next slide. So again, just holding in our minds, there's so many things we can do, How are we gonna choose which things we're gonna do? I wanna encourage you all to hold close this idea, not just of filling a gap, meeting a need, but doing so in a way that is gonna make the next flood less scary, that's gonna make the disaster something that we're ready for, because we've talked about it and we've thought about, oh, here's a good plan. Can we adjust it in this little way? Can we add a committee? Can we add a second floor of storage? Can we make a little tiny change that's really gonna impact the resilience of a project, of a huge investment we make as a group of people working together? So I would say the difference between a good intervention and an intervention that increases resilience is in those tiny little thoughts. So as you're championing your priorities, as you're being brave and saying, I really think we need to develop a housing strategy or reconfigure our downtown, push yourself to get at those details, because now is such a pivotal moment for shaping these projects that are then gonna have committees behind them and resources and support to make them happen. So what we're gonna do is look at 3 areas of the community resilience assessment. As a group, we're just gonna talk about a couple of sections. There's a lot of data. There should be a QR code on the yellow sheet. If you wanna look at a report of all of the results, we've compiled all the bar graphs. You can see okay, people felt this way about this and this way about that. But we're just gonna draw your attention to a couple of really interesting spots. And we were able to determine that they were interesting not just because of the data, but because of all of the conversation we had in July. We heard so much about communication systems, we heard so much about food and access to food, and we heard so much about managing our river and our watershed. So we're gonna look specifically at those, and then you all, I hope, are seeing your little slips of paper that I lovingly tore up just for you. If anybody doesn't have little slips of paper, there should be more floating around. And we've got, yeah, let me see them. Fantastic, wonderful. So I'm gonna hand off to Mindy in a moment to walk us through this activity where you are gonna get to say, what you think increases, decreases, or does not impact our resilience at all. And those little sheets of paper are gonna give us a visual of, do you think, this is your red sheet of paper, that this does not increase resilience? Are you neutral or maybe unclear if it impacts our resilience at all? Or does this increase our resilience? And as a reminder, resilience is our positive ability to adapt and address and recover from catastrophic disruption.
Hey everybody, I'm Mindy Blank. I use she, her pronouns, and I am a former co-director of community resilience organizations. For about 7 years, I was directing and co-directing, and I've spent a lot of time with this community resilience assessment. But this is the first time that I've been part of the community resilience assessment in the actual community where I live, which was pretty cool. I moved to Johnson on June 30th, and then this event happened 2 weeks later, and so it was awesome to get a snapshot of what people here think about the community and the perceptions. So I'm gonna dive into some of these highlighted assessment results that kind of correlate to conversations that we're trying to have, some of the big conversations that came up in July. So this first one, the question was about communication and transparency. And some of the criteria in this that people were rating are many modes of communication are used. For example, emergency alerts, radio, newspaper mailings, online forums, bulletin boards, etc. Discussion forums are meaningful, respectful, and accessible. Town information and news is posted quickly and broadly in all used languages. Emergency communication plans exist at the neighborhood and town levels. So you can see in this graph here that about 35 people rated this as a 1 or a 2, so pretty low level of resilience. About 30 people scored this a 3, so medium resilience, and about 11 people said that this was a 4 or 5, so higher level of resilience. So actually, next slide, Jess, please. So what we're going to do here is this exercise that Lena started describing, to dig a little bit deeper into this conversation about communication systems and what interventions might actually help this area and help Johnson increase resilience in this area, and for you to be thinking about some of the pros and cons of different types of interventions. And the nuances here of what may or may not increase resilience over the short term and long term. So this is where you're going to use your little red, yellow, and green cards. And so I'm going to ask you a question here. Who's ready with their cards? You ready? Okay, awesome, good. Okay, good deal. Okay, does a town-wide siren alarm system make our community more resilient? Hold up your card, what you think, whether that's not increasing resilience, maybe neutral, or it definitely is increasing resilience. Yes, the red is not, it doesn't increase resilience, yellow is neutral or maybe, and green is yes, it increases resilience. Okay. Cool, okay, very interesting. Okay, great. I'm gonna ask you the next question here, and then we're gonna talk about the nuances to your responses here, okay? Does having neighborhood committees and coordinated response, so people are more in direct communication, make our community more resilient? I'll repeat that. Does having neighborhood committees and coordinated response, so people are in more direct communication, make our community more resilient? Cool, okay. All right, last one here. Does repurposing and utilizing other communications lists, such as the school email list, for communications about town-wide disruptions make our community more resilient? Okay. Okay, cool. Thank you. So let's discuss. What about these actions make our community more or less resilient? We want to take maybe 2 or 3 comments here as to why you scored the way you did, and to pull out some of these nuances that you're picking up on and that you're thinking about with these questions. So what about these actions make our community more or less resilient?
I think what I'm thinking of is we've got these from the state. They put out these action alerts on your cell phone, and it seems like that gets to a lot of people. You know, usually it's about accidents on Route 15 or this kind of thing, but it seems like that could be expanded pretty easily and could solve a fair amount of these problems that we've had in the past.
Cool, thank you. One person back here.
Thank you. The flood that happened a year ago, it literally stopped 50 feet from my house. I was lucky, some others were not. I did not know our community was in trouble until I got up that morning, looked out the window, and said, I don't see any traffic. I walked outside. I then could look down the street and see there was flooding. I should have been alerted that the flood waters were coming so that I possibly could have done something to make my house a little more resilient. I had zero warning that flood waters were approaching my house. That is why I raised red on the first one. Thank you.
Thanks.
Are you talking just about the first one or any of them? Okay. So I voted red on the middle one. It sounds like a lovely idea, but it sounds pretty complicated. You got to get people on committees. Someone has to manage the committee. Someone has to oversee the committee. Someone has to get, it sounds lovely. So neighbor looking after neighbor just day to day. I think we hope we do that, but I wouldn't look at that to be our response to an emergency. The management of it just seems like it's very time consuming, complicated, and what if someone's sick that day and they can't convene whomever? So.
Okay, thank you, everyone. We have to wrap up that conversation. We're going to move on to the next. But this is really good food for thought, and I'm sure that all of you are having thoughts churning, and so keep those thoughts churning. Okay, so we're going to move on to this next topic, food supply. It'll be food supply and food equity. So in the assessment, the first question that we open with is about food as this very basic need. And some of the criteria in this category is that food is primarily sourced locally. Many residents grow and store food. There are thriving community gardens and farms. The region grows enough food to sustain all residents. Food is produced with methods that cultivate healthy soils and ecosystems. Food systems are prepared for and respond well to our changing climate. And so about 49 people said that this is a fairly low resilience area in Johnson. About 11 people said it's moderately resilient, so scored a 3 on the assessment. And about 5 people said that this is a really high area of resilience, or a 4 or 5 in Johnson. And next, yeah, good. Thank you so much, Jess. You're on it. We're combining the food supply and food equity assessment questions to have this conversation. So some of the criteria in the food equity category is that people can afford and access enough of the food they need and want in this community, town, and region, including culturally appropriate, local, and healthy foods. People can afford and access land and wild space for growing, harvesting, and foraging food. Next slide, please. Okay. So this is the activity again. So get those cards ready. Does opening a grocery store in the same spot where the old one was make our community more resilient? Red, yellow, or green? Oh, fascinating. Cool. I'm so interested to hear from people. This is so great. Thank you. Okay. All right. Does opening a member-owned co-op or general store with fresh food make our community more resilient? Uh-huh. Okay. It looks like fall in here. So it looks like, oh, it's nice. Okay. Last one in this section. Does opening a grocery store in a new location on higher ground make our community more resilient? Wow. Okay. Okay, great. Thank you. All right. So 2 to 3 comments from people. What are you thinking? What are some of the nuances there in those 3 food, supply, and equity questions? Oh, thanks. I know. What about these actions make our community more or less resilient? Oh, good.
I love the idea of a co-op or general store with fresh food. The thing that I worry about is the cost effectiveness for families within our area to be able to pay to buy the things in those stores. I mean, it sounds dreamy, but honestly, I feel like where we live, we need a grocery store. We need a grocery store where you can get organic high-end things, you can get generic, you can get, middle of the road. We can try to get local fresh produce and as many local business items in there. But every family would be able to access food within their budget.
Thank you.
People, will be employing local people as well, right? So we'll be employing local people as well. So.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Okay, who else? Who else has a thought here?
Opening a grocery store in the same spot. We've been there and done that once, and that didn't work so well. But if it were a question of that's the only thing, having a grocery store in such a location versus no grocery store at all, I think would be a nuance in that question. If a new location or higher ground can't be found, for example, which I see as more viable in the long term.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, I worked at that grocery store in between floods in the deli, and you don't want to know how they left it after the first flood. It was not, in my opinion, not up to health standards. There's some dirty secrets under the salad bar, etc. So no, like the sand, honestly, the river sand never came out from underneath the hot wing bar and the salad area. I cleaned it every night. So I was like, how do we get this out? And they were like, we don't. So yeah, that's a clear-cut idea. I was curious, I mean, if the town owns land that's on higher ground that it can offer, like, I mean, these are, sure, we really need a grocery store, but it's a private corporate enterprise. And the only other commercial thing I saw next to Dollar General kind of puts you in the same position. Like, you don't want riverfront. Possibly Northern Vermont University has a small slice to partition off, give the town, sell the town, some way like that, because location-wise, that seems the most appropriate, is to develop right there. I mean, they've got a huge swath of the accessible village property there.
Okay, so the bond vote is still open till 7 p.m. That's a 17-acre spot that we already own. We have $1 million basically that's coming from the feds via, thank you, Bernie Sanders and our other federal representatives. 75% basically is already paid for. You're looking at 30 years of basically paying a cup of coffee and a donut a month. So I would suggest that any of you here that want, and we can put a grocery store there. I've already talked to the people that have been doing the planning. Any of you still interested in doing that? Hop on down to the municipal building and go vote yes right now before the polls close.
So I just heard that we are cruising through, and we actually have plenty of time to keep having these conversations, which is great. And so I just want to bring this back to thinking about resilience and what types of actions or interventions, are ultimately not very resilient versus have some benefits or neutral, and then those that really increased resilience in a bigger way. And so of these examples, or of others that you can think of, where, do you want to talk a little bit more about resilience and where these might fall on this spectrum of resilience, or kind of why you rated red, yellow, or green as you did?
I think one thing that's entering my mind is the difference between need and long-term resilience. We've got a lot of needs that are kind of immediate right now, but in my thinking about resilience, we're talking about down the road for a long time, and more long-term to really be able to hang in there. So I guess I'm being careful that I'm thinking long-term rather than short-term.
There's a lot of talk right now about the grocery store, but I wonder, given the resilience that the grocery store brings to Main Street, what about all the other businesses on the Main Street, and whether or not they will reopen or other businesses will choose to be there? As far as the location of the grocery store, there is, as we were told, money available from the feds. There's also money available from Ernie Pomerleau. So Pomerleau wants to rebuild where he owns the building. For those of you who don't know, he was 15 years old when he was laying concrete blocks on that building because his father owned it. So at a certain level, he has enough money so that he doesn't care whether he spends an extra $1 million in waterproofing. So I think it's kind of a toss-up. Yes, it's sort of silly to build a building on that spot because of the river flooding. But if somebody's willing to give us $1 million to build it on that spot, part of me says, let them do it. And then if it floods out, we're down the road and we can think about it, as opposed to making the decision right now to go on the Jewett property, even though I voted yes to the bond.
We may want the grocery store wherever. The bottom line is Ernie Pomerleau has kind of the say about it because he has the current building. He has made it clear to us that it's too expensive to build a new store. That is why he's willing to put the money into the current store. But that being said, you have to have a company that is willing to take that chance of putting a grocery store in that building. That is where the issue comes up. Ernie is absolutely willing to get that building up and going, but if he doesn't have somebody that wants to run a grocery store, that may not happen. There is a store that's a possibility, but things are slow moving and there's grant money they're waiting on.
I think it's worth making a comment about the supply and equity part of this too, so that all of our eggs aren't in one basket of just one grocery store. Because resilience doesn't involve just rebuilding one grocery store. It's a private enterprise anyway. As a community, we need to think more about food supply and equity. We have the Dollar General still. We have a really, really nice farm stand still. And I don't see a lot of people going hungry, although I know that there are people in our community that are. I mean, how many of us are more concerned about the people who are truly going hungry in this town versus those of us who have the privilege of being able to drive to Morrisville? You know, resilience is not just one grocery store.
Thank you for sharing that piece. Something that we're trying to kind of bring home here is that resilience is multiple actions, is many different things combined, and it's not just one straightforward action. A lot of the time it's multiple things built on each other. So thank you for bringing that in. So I think we'll switch to the next here, and then we can have another robust conversation on this. So the assessment question was on river corridors and floodplains, and the criteria in that is waterways are managed through an integrated protection and restoration plan with regional coordination and special protections for sensitive aquatic and riparian natural areas. Residents, businesses, and towns are educated about and maintain land and water sources to support health of ecosystems. Town bylaws protect waterways and prevent development in floodplains. Town flooding is reduced by functioning wetlands and floodplains. Okay, so 50 people scored this as a 1 or 2, so pretty low resilience. About 6 or 7 people scored it a 3, medium, moderate resilience, and maybe one person said that this was a high area of resilience in Johnson. So this was particularly interesting data. This one, I think, had the most consensus. So this was one that we really wanted to highlight and pull out here to discuss more. Next slide, please. Okay, so get your little pieces of paper ready. Does Johnson participating in Lamoille River watershed-wide management make our community more resilient? Red, green, or yellow? Ha-ha. Uh-huh. Cool. Okay, thank you. All right, number 2. Does dredging the Lamoille around Johnson make our community more resilient? Okay, interesting, thank you. And last, does restoring wetlands and floodplains around Johnson make our community more resilient? Okay, all right, thank you. So let's talk about it. What about these actions? What about these interventions make our community more or less resilient? What do you think? Why did you use the card that you did? What are some of these nuances here?
Just speak to the first one about watershed wide. This is how I understood it. We can't act alone here. There are X number of communities that are on the Lamoille River, and we need to work together, in other words, so we don't just send the water down river to the next guy. So that's what I understood by that, and it seems to me we need to speak as a whole. And I don't know how and whether that can happen.
Yeah, it seems to me this is a problem that requires big picture thinking. So we need to be able to coordinate with towns around us and understand what would happen if Eden gets a lot of rain that ultimately comes down the Giham, for example. So it's not just us and what happens right here, but it can be what happens in another town that comes our way. And there are just all kinds of different things that affect where it floods. For example, if someone builds and does a lot of landfill, does that mean the water is going to come up higher or someplace else? So I think having a big picture understanding of what parts of this we can change and control, and also recognizing the things that we're not going to be able to control if a big disaster comes our way, so we know what's going to happen when. So I think that big picture thinking around our watershed will help us prevent some emergencies, but also manage and better communicate in other emergencies that are beyond our control.
I think restoring the wetlands and floodplains is easy to talk about when it is general and not very specific. And I think when we start talking about it specifically in specific areas that flood frequently, it actually impacts the lives of people. So I think it actually is really important, and it's really hard, and it's really uncomfortable. But it is the way we go from being a town that was built on mills, on rivers, to being a town that is resilient and can withstand water, and all the places water comes from, and all the places water flows to. Yeah, I think that's really important for resilience, and unfortunately, we're largely built around those water systems for very good reason.
Anyone else have thoughts here that they want to share? About, oh yes, here we go. Excuse me.
I just have a question for maybe someone else here knows the environmental impact directly in Johnson if we were dredging. I'm not so sure of that. I mean, I think in general as a community, we exalt and love and protect our environment. At the same time, there's a lot of hypocrisy around environmental protection, even in the state of Vermont. I mean, we have 90,000 acres of GMO crops, corn for cows, so our beautiful dairy is, you know, glyphosate sprayed fields eventually get into our waterways. So I think when it comes to sacrificing people's properties or communities or lifestyles or, you know, housing replanning in other locations, we have to stay big picture about, as I mentioned, here's another example of hypocrisy in Vermont. Mosquito Joe in Waterbury is allowed to spray synthetic pyrethroids on all the properties in Stowe because those folks don't like mosquitoes when they come up to visit. So they'll spray their 20-acre properties up in Robinson Springs during the 5th instar of not only monarch butterflies, but my favorite, the Luna moth. So simultaneously, they're allowed to decimate our population of butterflies and Luna moths. There, that was my hypocrisy. And the question was about dredging, though, if anybody else knows why we stopped. Because all the old timers say, it did a lot better when we were dredging.
I'm not a hydrologist, but I do know that when you dredge, you essentially pick up the velocity of the river, and it just makes things way worse downstream. And it actually digs the river down really deep, so you start to get banks falling into it, and it's sort of a false thought that you're going to be helpful, even where you do it. And you can see some examples of it around the state, because we used to do it. And down in Stowe there, Notch Brook is a good example where that, if any of you have been around here very long, that thing used to flood out into the fields there at Percy's and Bouchard's, but now it's so deep it doesn't do it, but it just creams everything downstream. So it's, yeah, short term, but not very effective.
I just want to let people know that there is, if you don't already, a watershed assessment that is going on, and they are taking into account like all the different factors, because there are so many to consider on a watershed level. Everything from, I think they call it benching, which is recreating some of the floodplain that was where it already could be done without displacing necessarily people. There was also talk about, what about our reservoirs? Now, if you want to talk about dredging, our reservoirs are full of sediment. That reservoirs are the places that are supposed to be flood mitigation, so that we can slow it down, release it, as time goes on, release it before the flood event. And we don't believe that that is actually happening. And that is, to me, one of the first things that is so potentially easy to help mitigate the amount of water that is coming downstream. And so I was kind of excited to hear that at least there is somebody at the moment going through, looking at every piece and puzzle of the puzzle, including the dredging piece. How could that be part of the puzzle? To try and reclaim some land, slow down the water, do more planning so that maybe we can reduce the impacts in the future.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that conversation. And, this exercise was intended to look at this spectrum of resilience as you're moving into this exercise to vote on priorities and what you want to work on in your community, and to give some additional framing around that in terms of what you might vote on, and also how you might participate, whether it's in what you'd end up choosing tonight, or whether it's in what you feel empowered to take on yourself or be part of yourself in whatever way that might be. And so thinking about resilience on this spectrum, and that it takes multiple actions to really increase the resilience, and that sometimes there are we know that this town needs more food options. We know that. But it's like, what food options will actually make the community more resilient, in the short term and also the long term. So I'm going to pass it along to Jess to kind of wrap up this portion, and thank you so much for your participation.
I wanted to go back to a previous slide, but we can just close it. Okay. So something that is so interesting, I'll take this off. It's really muffled. Something that was really interesting in watching the colors is that there were some, when we were asking the question about making things more or less resilient, you can shut it off. Some of them were, it looked like September, some green leaves, some yellow leaves, some red leaves. There were others where it was a very clear green or a very clear red. You all will have plenty of opportunities to vote tonight, so I'm excited that you're already ready to do that. But what I heard in the conversation wasn't necessarily about what made things more or less resilient. It was about feasibility. And for us at community resilience organizations, we think a lot about where we want to go and what makes that possible. Because most of the things that we want to see in our towns, in our state, maybe fixing some of the contradictions that we have, they aren't feasible now. But there are these multiple actions that we can take together that can build towards a different reality. And if I kind of slow down and think about some of the examples that you all were voting on, and when we talked about, there was a big red for rebuilding a grocery store in the same location. But then I actually heard some of the same people who voted red making an argument for why we would do that. And in our practice, we practice like approaching things from multiple angles. And I think that Johnson has the opportunity to do that. And disruption creates opportunity to try new things. And maybe the most feasible in the next 6 to 12 months is to have a grocery store, and maybe it's in the same location. That doesn't mean that when a group is one of the groups or one of the actions that's thinking about bringing a grocery store to Johnson, what if it, as somebody mentioned, was bringing multiple food access options to this town? Because when we think about food access resiliency, we have to think about where our food comes from. And I know that there are many people who want to support local, and then there's like, how can I actually support local? And maybe that's a 10-year plan and not a 10-month plan, right? So I hope that in this exercise, there's some space for what can be done now. And as you build into voting on these, and as you go into the third meeting, you start meeting in these issue areas. The other thing that strikes me is how something that might be very resilient, and the point in the back, it's so much easier to say, yeah, I'm for wetlands and for floodplains, until it's your house, your backyard, maybe your section of the Loyal Rail Trail. I don't actually know. I haven't looked at the maps, right? It's so much easier to say I'm interested in floodplains in isolation. And so an encouragement would be, would it help to consider allowing floodplains in maybe some beloved parts of the town, or maybe places that people currently live, if your town also had a housing plan to help move people uphill? That becomes a very caring response to some really hard decisions that have to be made. And thank God, none of those decisions and not all of those actions are happening tonight. But I hope that it encourages you all to be in communication and in support of one another, not just a grocery store, but the businesses downtown. How do we connect to our tourism opportunities and care for the watershed? How do we actually allow the rail trail to maybe be a way that we promote the health of the Lamoille River, right? So connectivity and creativity, but also the patience to do multiple things at once. And with that, we'll hand it back over.
Thank you.
Actually, now all my things are over there.
Oh, that's okay. Jess is walking back. Double Jess. Oh my gosh, thank you so much, Community Resilience Organization. Crows, can we give them a hand? Thank you. So I hope that was fun and a nice way to kind of just get the juices flowing and some thinking going, because like Jess said, it's not any one thing, it's a whole bunch of things, right? Okay, so now down to the nitty-gritty. Alyssa is going around the room. She's handing out, and Lauren, handing out sort of the long-form version of the action themes that are behind me on the wall. So just the titles are on the wall, but now in your hands you have a long list of themes and ideas that we cultivated from, like I said, around 200 responses to surveys, what we heard in the first forum, and the Community Resilience Assessment comments. And so I just wanted to kind of remind us where we're at in our agenda. And this is a slog of an agenda, so I really appreciate you guys sticking with it. There will be some relief and breaks throughout, but please stay to the very end, because that's how you find out what the top 5 priorities are and get to vote. So we just wanted to say that this tonight really is about the what still. I know it's our tendency to think about how, and how could we do this? Is this even possible? Is this feasible? We heard that in the comments you were just making. But tonight, we really can dream big. We can be visionary. We can be bold, okay? Because what comes next is really thinking about the how and getting the resources that you need. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a moment and we're going to do a group read. So we'll run the mic around and have volunteers read these themes that are on the paper that you have in your hands now. And then we'll ask a couple questions about that. But we're going to start with the group read. Does everybody have a copy of the ideas and opportunities list? Yeah? Okay. So again, these ideas are they're from you. And we want to make sure that everybody has a chance to really understand what we heard from you and give us some feedback on that. So we have a mic to run. Can I have our first brave volunteer who will read the first paragraph? Over here? Yeah.
This is a list of, just the first paragraph.
Oh, yeah, sorry. Just to bring the grocery store to Johnson. Action. Mm-hmm.
Bring a grocery store to Johnson. A task force could form to determine where and with what ownership model a grocery store could open and operate in Johnson. Some tasks could include identifying possible locations for a grocery store, developing a list of property owners at those locations, and exploring models for ownership such as co-op. Possible locations could include in the New Light Industrial Park, at the college, or other non-flood prone locations. This group could research food co-op models such as Springfield Food Co-op, Buffalo Mountain Co-op in Hardwick, and Hunger Mountain Co-op in Montpelier.
Thank you. Next action.
Increase awareness and access to food. A task force could form that helps to coordinate, share resources, and expand access to food in Johnson. This group could develop information on existing food infrastructure, such as the Johnson Food Shelf and area farms. This group could explore developing a food hub for startup, value-added product development, and connect farms to large volume purchasers, such as the college or area resorts. This group could also support intergenerational farming efforts or land acquisition for new and young farmers.
Thank you. Next reader. Great.
Strengthen the local emergency response plan. A task force could form to strengthen and expand the emergency response plan for Johnson in coordination with the local emergency response coordinator and the local first responders, emergency managers, town officials, healthcare providers, nonprofit organizations, such as the Lamoille County Planning Commission, LEARN, Lamoille Area Recovery Network, and others. This would include documenting procedures for standing up access to food, backup power, and clean water, and locations for residents and pets to shelter safely. Once the plan is clarified, this group could develop an education and outreach strategy and hold practice events for the emergency response for all town-led initiatives, as well as individual household level responses.
Thank you. Anyone else willing to read? Just raise your hand and Alyssa will come to you. We've got someone here and someone there. Okay, we'll come to you next.
Develop a local lead recovery group, neighbor-to-neighbor network. A task force could form to build out a neighborhood-to-neighbor network that strengthens and builds upon existing connections in Johnson neighborhoods and regions, and builds upon the regional long-term recovery group for Lamoille County Area Recovery Network, LEARN. During non-emergencies, this group could support individuals and families, but creates the ability to pivot to support individuals during an emergency. In addition, this group could build out a network of local care providers and volunteers that could formally develop a plan for checking in on vulnerable folks in emergencies and also non-emergencies.
Thank you. We had a volunteer up here.
Thank you. Develop and build out local communication channels. A task force could form that builds out existing opportunities for community-wide communication, such as developing a protocol and using the town siren system, a town-wide text system, or other local communication tools. In addition, this group can build upon and coordinate with the local emergency response plan, Vermont Alerts, as well as non-emergency communication. You're too close to me.
I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Our mics don't like each other.
As well, let's see, where was I? As well as non-emergency communication around local events and information. This group could also determine a platform to consolidate real-time information of road closures and river levels that are in coordination with local level information from emergency responders or other residents, and state information such as 511 and river gauges.
Thank you. Another volunteer to read? There's someone here, and Alyssa's going to the back there. Thank you.
Rivershed understanding, mapping, coordination, and communication. A task force could form to collect and compile information from hydrologists, existing river gauges, state agencies that are mapping flood scenarios, longtime residents, and other relevant data sources to build a watershed understanding of the river system. This group would coordinate with neighboring rivershed towns, regional and state groups, and organizations in the Greater Lamoille watershed to coordinate communication during the flood and non-flood events and enable up and down river communities to better prepare, plan mitigation strategies, and support local emergency response plans.
Thank you. We had a couple of volunteers over here. Thanks.
Advance local flood mitigation and restoration strategies. A task force could form to share relevant and accessible information around natural and environmental systems in order to plan local flood mitigation projects. This group could map out existing natural resources in town and develop information and communication around those assets in collaboration with the Conservation Commission. This group should work with local, regional, and statewide partners, including other communities along the rivers, to investigate and share ways to reduce the impact of severe storms. Some possible things to explore include identifying flood-proofing solutions in buildings, locations for flood barriers, relocating critical services out of the floodplain, and implementing river management activities to slow and infiltrate floodwaters. Some river management tactics to explore include floodplain restoration, wetland and beaver habitat restoration and creation, dredging, or other strategies as appropriate.
Thank you. Another volunteer? We've got two right here. Thank you.
Support business startups and creative economy infrastructure. A task force could develop connections and infrastructure to support business startups and build upon existing creative network in Johnson. This group could look into ways to reduce barriers for startup companies and encourage mentoring or other resource sharing with existing businesses in Johnson with a formalized space or structure for skill sharing and skill building. This group could look into and develop a maker space, including possible resources such as an incubator kitchen, woodshop, ceramic studio, or others. This group could provide information and expand the use of the Johnson Revolving Loan Fund as an avenue for entrepreneurs.
Thank you. We hand it over there. Thank you.
Develop a housing strategy. A task force could be formed to increase housing outside of the floodplain to replace lost units and add additional housing units, including senior housing and rental apartments in Johnson. Adding and replacing units would build the town's grand list and provide housing for those wishing to remain in the community after losing homes or rental units in flooding and buyouts. This group could work with state housing authorities, housing finance agencies, and other developers to encourage building in Johnson. In addition, this group could look into mixed-use development with businesses on first floors and housing above, extending village water and sewer, and developing incentives for businesses and developers to come to Johnson. This group could pursue additional efforts to improve existing housing throughout weatherization to increase the affordability for residents, creation of additional rental units, home share, and other modes of expanding housing units within existing structures.
Thank you. Next volunteer. We got someone in the back there and someone up here as well.
Downtown reconfiguration and redevelopment. Through public input and engagement, including property owners and businesses downtown, a task force could create a vision and plan for Johnson's downtown and core services. In coordination with property owners, town officials, college representatives, residents, and businesses, this group could identify and map out flood-prone parcels and available land out of the flood zone to relocate services such as the grocery store, library, post office, town offices, wastewater plant, businesses, and more. This vision could include plans to enable services to remain open during town-wide emergencies. Some identified opportunities include turning some of the existing downtown footprint into floodplain parks with gazebos, riparian buffers, and river access, relocating the post office and grocery store with additional housing and town operations to School Street, north of the Guyon River or the college property. This group could also explore places for public restrooms, informational signage for visitors and residents, and more.
Thank you. We had a volunteer up here, but raise your hand and we'll come to you. Yeah, there we go.
Okay, where are we at? Bike, pedestrian?
Yep, bike pedestrian. Yep.
Pedestrian and public transportation improvements. This task force could work to improve all modes of alternative transportation, including bike lanes and safety, pedestrian sidewalks and connectivity, and improving access to public transportation options. In coordination with Rural Community Transportation, RCT, this group could expand and increase awareness of the on-demand transit options. Some possible actions could include a Johnson-wide mapping of bike-friendly and walkable routes and a walk audit of downtown and the college that would increase bike and pedestrian safety.
Thank you. Enthusiastic reader.
Thank you. Yes, this one's close to my heart. Capitalize and increase recreational economic opportunities. Building upon the unique location of Johnson, a task force could work to promote recreational tourism from the Lamoille Valley Rail Trail, the Long Trail, the Lamoille River, and many other trails. I'll just editorialize. We're the only town in the state of Vermont that can say that. This group could encourage tourists to visit Johnson's downtown, resupply, eat, and stay through collective visioning, signage, promotional materials, structured activities, and events for residents, and some events catered to folks from out of town, such as bike or canoe race. Building on the current feasibility study of getting Lamoille Valley Rail Trail users from the trail to downtown, additional signage, bike lanes, and other amenities could be identified and developed. Other recreational opportunities to explore and build out include a garden and historic walks, dog park, adult recreation leagues, a campground, and power sports trails and access points. This group could partner with the Conservation Commission and other local groups and organizations to create new green space along the river and increase river access through buyouts and other means.
Thank you. Next reader. Raise your hands. We'll come right to you. This person right here in the green, she's raised her hand a couple times.
Increase community events. Building upon the successful existing community events like Tuesday Night Live, Field Days, and Community Oven, a task force could build additional seasonal and year-round events such as a sap run, community art opportunities, street parties and potlucks, and more, through an intergenerational and inclusive lens that welcomes young families, seniors, LGBTIA and BIPOC, and everyone in between. Additional events could be generated that foster community spirit, creativity, and energy. This group could develop ideas for additional events through outreach and communication, including utilizing the town mailings or online surveys, in-person tabling at existing gathering points in the community, and more.
Thank you. Next reader. Raise your hands. Over here. Thank you. Also, the bleachers have lots of people who could read, I bet. So just coming to you next.
Enhance and strengthen the college-town connection. A task force could form to build a stronger connection between the town and college. Representatives from both entities would enable expansion of programming and creative visioning of the existing spaces. Building upon the Sports Mentor program, additional programming for college students to be youth mentors, interns at businesses, or other connections in Johnson would enable college students to connect with and be involved in the greater Johnson community. This group could also explore existing college building use and creative repurposing building into a hostel, grocery store, community center, or other shared town amenities. The group could explore shared use models for existing infrastructure of the theater space and Shape Fitness Pool Center to be profitable and a community asset.
Thank you. Volunteers over here. Yes. Amazing. Go for it.
Thank you.
The baby has to read.
Yeah,
Just
we'll
kidding.
see. A task force could be developed to, create a community center. A task force could be developed to identify possible location and services for a community center. This center could be a year-round flexible indoor gathering place for intergenerational connections and programs. The group could identify existing buildings that could pivot to become a community center with amenities such as adequate parking, bathrooms, kitchen, flexible, large and small meeting places. Oh, this is tough. Though, here, let's see. Here, let me finish. Yeah, you take over. Here, hold it and I'll do it. Through deliberate creation of spaces of youth and teens, cross-generational programming such as technology courses led by teens would promote community connections. Through collaboration with existing events, this group could identify expansion opportunities and build upon the popular current events into year-round programming and opportunities.
Great. And last but not least, yeah, good job. One more. Anybody in the bleachers this time? Oh, close to the, okay. All right, fine. The bleachers are off the hook.
Explore village and town collaboration and shared services. A task force could form to explore options for collaboration, shared services, and administrative capacity and possible merger scenarios of the town and village. This task force could research and offer options for the community to consider around cost reduction, shifting tax burdens, and other pertinent topics.
Thank you. All right, we made it through the list. Good job. So this is what we heard from you all, and like I said, we do our best to synthesize and pull everything together. But before we move on to voting, our first round of voting, we just want to make sure: are there any mistakes that you're noticing or corrections? Did we call something the wrong name? Did we, is there anything in any of these themes that you see that we need to correct? And Beth has her hand up, so we're going to go to her. We have, Alyssa will come with a mic. Thank you for using the mic. Not only does it help others hear you, but because of the live streaming component, it helps those at home hear us as well. Okay, yes.
Okay, so I'm not correcting mistakes as much as I just want to point out that when we talk about the river shed and when we talk about flood mitigation and restoration activities and all of that type of thing, I just want to make the point that if we have multiple groups focused on this, it could get very taxing for local entities that already work on this through their day-to-day job. LCPC comes to mind immediately. They already do all of these things, and if they're working with multiple groups to support them in doing all of these things, it just adds that much more burden, limiting their ability to help everyone. So just want to say that out loud.
Yeah, no doubt there are connections to existing things that are happening. And what we see in communities when a priority is set, it's really important for some of the first actions of that group to do that sort of assessment and where does it make sense to coordinate, collaborate, combine, right? So I think, again, we don't have to worry about the how. It's more like what is important for Johnson to focus on. And I'll just say right now is not the time to do the big discussion and championing and deep discussion. After this first round of voting, that's when you guys will have a chance to really dig deep and talk about your thoughts and opinions about what's most important to focus on. But any mistakes or corrections, and then I do want to also note that if something's really glaringly missing from your perspective that you feel like we should add to, like, we can add another action right now if you feel like that this is just glaringly missing from your perspective. That's also something we could talk about right now. So mistakes, corrections, anything we're missing. I see a hand here, and then we've got two over here. Yep, go ahead.
One of the things I think that's glaringly missing from this event is the select board and the trustee members. There's one here that I know of. Mark Woodward, are there 3? Okay, that's 3 out of what, 10?
There's someone behind you too.
10.
Yep.
So that I think it's part of the problem is that there isn't a lot of buy-in or leadership among the town and village governments.
Sure. So I would sort of say 2 things. One is I forgot to mention that, anything that we arrive at this evening, it's really about setting a pathway to the future, and it doesn't, change the fact that there'll have to be appropriate decisions made at certain moments, right? Like there would be a vote or a decision that the select board would have to make or something. So we're not sort of replacing any correct process that would have to follow. And then the other thing I want to say is, do you have an action that you might want to add to this list, or are there one of these actions where you could see putting something about engagement with the village trustees and the select board? Sir? Okay. So you're not suggesting adding an action, you're just noticing something
I'm just
to the room.
noticing that they're not here.
Okay, all right. Well, there are some folks here, and certainly it doesn't sound like you're adding an action here. So there was a couple of folks here, right here, and then someone over here as well. Yep, go ahead.
I'm just trying to figure out, because I'm looking at 3 of these that seem like they could combine. So I'm wondering, rather than set them aside, but look at incorporating, like the strengthening of a local emergency response plan certainly could tie into develop a local lead recovery group and neighbor-to-neighbor network as part of that, and also to develop and build out our local communication channels. I see that all as could be one major group that takes each one of those things. Like you have your vision, but you have your mission, could incorporate your different actions.
Yep. So this happens every time. Pretty much every time we make a list of these activities, I just want to say somebody's like, hey, these 3 things could go together. So I just want to caution you in a couple of ways around that. One is we could probably combine, and then we'd end up with one giant, overwhelming list of things. So I would discourage you from combining. And the other reason you might want to think about keeping these discrete is, could a group that is working on the things that you mentioned do all of those things and actually get them done, or not, right? If you want, and this is our general process for these convenings, just like town meeting, if you really feel like any of these things must be combined, we'd want a formal proposal from the floor, and we would then do a raise hand straw poll vote to see what the room is wanting to do. And again, I just want to say that all of these actions are likely connected, might need coordination, but they're deliberately discrete because it represents a body of work that feels doable, and it also was the way that the community gave us their input. So it happens every time. No worries. Totally. I see it too. It's hard not to do that. Our brains are made to do that, so no problem. But if you feel strongly, we'd take a formal motion from the floor if that's how we want to do it. And then there was a person over here, you had your hand raised in the gray, and then someone up on the bleachers as well.
Yeah, I was going to make a similar point about combining building a grocery store and increasing food awareness. They to me, don't seem to be an either-or proposition, but rather a both-and. And I think it'd be tragic to jettison one in order to achieve the other.
Right. Okay. So would you like to make a formal motion to combine those 2 things?
Yes.
Okay. Would you say it like that?
Yes,
I just want to hear it. Do it.
I hereby move that we combine bringing a grocery store to Johnson with the notion of increasing awareness and access to food generally.
Okay. So we have a formal motion before the room. Raise your hand if you vote yes, we should combine these two actions into one task force. I'm looking around the room, so this is the yes hands. Oh, geez. Are you guys going to make me count? All right, lower your hands. Raise your hands for no. We shouldn't combine them. Okay, that's pretty obvious. You guys feel like a task force could both think about bringing a grocery store back and looking at food access. So we're going to put those together. So when we do our voting activity, you're voting for those two things together, and Lauren's going to put them as such. Okay? All right, so I just want to bring, there is a hand over here, and just the question that I'm asking, just in case, if anyone has one, mistakes or corrections we want to ensure we get, or additional actions that feel glaringly missing to you. Yep.
Is this
Sir.
on?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
There are 3 members of the select board that have been here. Mark Woodward, Shane Spence, and Evan Patch was here. I noticed that Duncan Hastings is not here. That's
Okay.
Specifically, though, on your list of co-ops, you included Springfield, which is a substantial distance away, but omitted Morristown, which points out the danger of making lists.
Yes.
You include the wrong ones and omit the right ones. So
Yeah.
specifics in that case are best left out.
Yeah, do you want us to add the Morristown Co-op to people's thinking? I mean, it was just naming some models around the state
Right.
that you could research.
But
so
I would name models that are close. Hardwood's
Sure.
close.
Yeah.
Morristown is like the closest.
Yeah, okay. We can ensure that we're thinking of that as, if you're voting for that one, please think of that one as included. Yep, over here.
I just want to clarify, when you vote on one of these things, are you saying you agree to everything in it? Like, say you think we need better communication channels, but you don't think town siren system is the right solution?
Right. Yeah, I think it's the general idea, right? Like, we're going to, in the next meeting, really dive into how, right? You're going to start, these are just, again, these are comments that we pulled into themes. People did talk about the siren system, and we tried to organize them in a way that seemed to make sense. Of course, it's the broad theme that you're kind of voting on. The specifics will come after you form these committees, and you start thinking about an action plan and the resources you'll need, the how part. So,
And is the solution a task force for all of these?
It could be a task force or committee. Certainly we'll start by convening people interested in taking actions on this, on these actions. That's kind of our form that we use. And I'm also hearing that there's other things happening, and so there might be a need to invite others to be included in those conversations. So what we're doing in this first round of voting, and we're going to do that really soon here. We've got dots, we've got stickers. It's fun. You want to do this. Is really saying, these are the things I want to talk about more. These are the things I feel are important for Johnson's resilience, for our recovery, right? This is the first round of voting. So, and again, we're not losing. The ideas aren't going away forever. These will be in your report. We're just getting down from 15 now to 10. So I can't remember if there was another hand over here. I see a couple more. We'll take 2 more comments, and then we'll start voting. Right here? Yep, and then we'll go behind you there.
So question,
Yeah.
As I listened to everybody read, it struck me that everything on these pages would contribute to healthy, strong, resilient communities. Have you ever done a process where a community chooses the first round, and then you come back a number of years later and take a look at, okay, now that we have kept the floodwaters at bay, let's talk about how we populate businesses or something like that.
Yeah. We often hear from communities. We have 5-year celebrations. We have look backs. We have sort of reinvigoration of a process. It often is a list of things that maybe didn't get done the first time, but sometimes it's really different. We've certainly worked with communities on a process again. Yeah. Any other staff have comments on that?
Yeah, multiple times. We have another program a little different from this, but there's communities that, did it over a varied amount of time. So again, nothing is lost. They're all up here, but certainly something that might reemerge in the future.
Yeah. I'll say this. You guys pick 5 big ideas and you get them done in 3 years and you're ready to go some more. You'll have a really good list of, hey, maybe we could go back and do some of those, right? Good starting place for your next to-do list. Okay, there was one more person right here, in the plan.
I hope I'm not the only person in the room that remembers that this is a revisit, that we've been through this process before, and welcome back.
Yes, thank you. Yes, it was
the other thing I wanted to say, though, when we're doing our voting, we don't consider feasibility, right? This is just pie in the sky, the thing that we're most interested in. Yes. And if we're deciding between 2, and there's one like, well, man, there's no way that's going to happen, and this other thing maybe is a little less important, but it seems more doable, like, how do you decide?
Well, that's really up to the individual voter, right? We've kind of given you a couple of lenses to sort of think of your voting through. One is, I read you a few points of vision, some of the ways that you envision reimagining Johnson. The other is, what makes Johnson recover from the flooding of last summer and become more resilient? And we had that sort of lens that we asked you to think about is through the resilience assessment in that discussion. But it really is about tonight, the vote is in your hands. I don't know the inside of your head and how you're going to use those dots. But those are the frameworks that we find are the most effective in terms of like that final list. But right now, your first vote is about to start. So we're going to start handing out dots. And again, this is not your definitive vote. This is, I'm voting for the things I want to talk more about. Right? That I want to have a deeper discussion on, something I want to champion. So we're handing out 8 dots to each person, yes, right? 8 dots. You can use your dots as you want. The only thing you can't do with your dots is trade your dots or give them to somebody else or hide your dots for the second round. You can put all your dots on one thing. You can spread them out evenly. And again, the idea is to take us from this list of 15 down to 10. Okay? So as soon as you have your dots, you can go on up there and start voting. The sooner that you finish voting, the sooner we can count and the sooner we get into the fun stuff. Okay? Use all the dots that you have right now. Please. Eight. You have 8 dots. They are red, I think. 8 red dots.
We have 8, but we're going to come up with 10.
You'll end up, yes, math. 8 dots. We'll count them and bring back the top 10.
You didn't say we couldn't sell them.
I didn't. Good luck.
driving all over. Well, next time you can help us count and maybe do step 2 tends to be a singular. That's how we always have. But this step is like usually just one person doing it, except for the vision. There's not a real good way to split that. Yeah. Because you need somebody who's like keeps something going. You've done a great job. Well, no, I didn't like this comment. I don't know if I'm respond to you. How about No, that's fine. That happens every time. The select board comment. Okay, but the select board invited us here again, right? That's the other thing. So that maybe they are here. I've heard that. Here, right. There's members of them here. And I think David left from the... I know. I looked over, like, I know, he walked out like as... Yeah. Anyways, it's okay, we'll call him. Yeah. Now we know who he is. Yeah, that he's interested. Okay, what's really interesting is to see the college. Oh, I'm so sorry. Are you okay? I'm totally okay. Oh, man. We just so moved. I know, but I smacked you with my clipboard. So that would be an interesting thing to be like, oops, I said that. Yeah.
Right, this is the 2-minute warning for those dot voting. So this is your 2 minutes to make sure you get your red dots on the wall before we take them down and start counting. 2-minute warning.
All right, wrapping up voting. Please don't leave. The second round of voting needs you too. But you are going to get a little break right now. Eat some pizza. There's so much pizza. And please take some and probably take some home. We're going to start the counting. Anyone's welcome to witness, but you can't talk to us when we do it. And we'll be back in just a few minutes.
Most of the building all needs the first floor. Walk in and just like, I'm home. I'm home.
Okay, folks, the big reveal, your top 10. It's about to happen. So come on back in. Someone open the door. That feels nice. I love it. Take a seat, take a seat. All right, I might recommend you have your list in your hand. Do we have pens, Alyssa, somewhere, or pencils? So we're gonna reveal and read the top 10. We won't make you read the full thing again, but we are just going to read off these your top 10 items here. We have some pencils if you want. With such a long list, we might recommend you star the ones that ended up on the top 10 list on your big list. So if you don't have something to write on, raise your hand and we'll bring around a little golf pencil for you. All right. Would you? Yeah. Thank you. All right, Lauren, keep your hands up. She'll bring you a pencil. Okay, so the top 10 ideas for action for Johnson, for Reimagine Johnson are, drum roll please, the things you want to discuss more are rivershed understanding, mapping, coordinating, and communication. These are in no particular order. They're just up here, okay? Doesn't matter how many votes they got, they're just up here. Okay, enhance and strengthen the college-town connection. Develop and build out local communication channels. Strengthen the local emergency response plan. I don't know what someone just said, but I'm just gonna keep going. Oh. I'm just kidding. Support business startups and creative economy infrastructure. Downtown reconfiguration and redevelopment. Now I know why you want me to slow down, because A, these are not in the order of your list, and I told you could star them. Sorry. Okay, we good? Should I go on? All right. Advance local flood mitigation and restoration strategies. I think that's on the second page. Develop a housing strategy. Second page. Thank you. Capitalize and increase recreational economic opportunities. And bring a grocery store to Johnson and increase awareness and access to food. The two on the front, which we combined through a floor vote. Okay, so these are the top 10 ideas. And what you said with that vote, like I said, I don't know what metrics you used, but what I say we're doing right now is having a bigger discussion about these, right? So now's your chance Now's your chance to tell us what you want everybody else to vote for and why. And again, we've given you a few lenses to consider. What, out of all of these actions, do you think would be the most meaningful thing that Johnson could do to recover from last year's flooding and to become more resilient, to reimagine what Johnson could be, and to really build towards the future that you want to see for your community? Okay. Anybody have one that you really want to try to convince your community members and neighbors here to vote for? Okay, I see 2 hands. I see 1, 2, 3, 4, and a mic runner is coming. She's eating. She's not doing that. She's doing something. Okay. Alyssa, she's sorry. Okay, so I kind of lost track of my hands, but yours was first. Keep your hands up, and Alyssa will come to you. So tell us why we should vote for what?
Okay. I'm advocating for enhance and strengthen the college-town connection. First of all, I think that if the college doesn't make it, we will be sitting here having a different kind of community meeting about what a world of hurt we will be in. They have resources but are struggling. We have resources but are struggling. And having just worked there for 12 years and been a resident of Johnson for 20 years, I just see so many ways in which we could help each other. And I don't think that that work is going to come from them. They have their hands full. They have demonstrated repeatedly that they're not willing to put the work in, so it has to come from us. I do, however, think that if it comes from our community, that there would be, some openness to having these discussions, but I think that it needs to come from us, and we can find a ton of mutually beneficial opportunities to improve both of our situations.
Wonderful. Thank you. Yeah. That's good. That was really good modeling of exactly what we hope you do. Like, convince us to vote for something. I love it. So good. All right, there was 2 hands over here. I think yours and yours. The person in the green was first.
I think number 1 is we have to make sure we are not a food desert. Okay? Food deserts do not survive. Without some type of grocery store, we are just going to keep on a decline. It doesn't matter whether we do have an industrial park. It doesn't matter with the connection to the college. If we are a food desert, we're screwed.
Okay. Right here.
I'm going to, no surprise, capitalize and increase recreational economic opportunities. As I kind of hinted, we are very unique in this town in terms of the resources we have. And when you look at all our neighbors, I am really disappointed in our town that we aren't keeping up with Cambridge. We aren't keeping up with Morrisville. We aren't keeping up with Hyde Park in terms of taking advantage of these. Somebody earlier mentioned long-term, okay? Recreation is the key to the survival of Johnson in the long term. Okay, it is an industry. We all saw it with COVID. Everybody wanted to get outside. So when you talk about the resiliency of Johnson, and especially the economic resiliency of Johnson, we really need to be concentrating on the outdoor recreation. And that will solve a lot of these other problems because it will attract the people. The grocery stores will be fighting to come in. The college will benefit from having these recreational opportunities. So we are very unique. As I said earlier, we're the only town in the state of Vermont that has these major trails that all intersect. And we can expand on those. We have no mountain bike trails. We don't have really any ATV trails. We can do better. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Who else wants to champion idea? Up here, and anyone on deck, or you're on deck?
I want to speak to advanced local flood mitigation and restoration strategies. I see it like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. If we don't deal with the water issue and the potential for being flooded again, none of the other lovely ideas will be able to take hold. So it seems to me we need to start there, work again across the whole county, everyone along the Lamoille in order to be able to have the basic foundation for this community to do all the other things we'd like to do.
Thank you. All right, over here in the flannel. Yeah, it's flannel time of year in Vermont. It's coming back.
My most important things and your most important things are different, but I can tell you without a doubt, it is unconscionable to put a dot on something you're not willing to work on. You should put your dot on whatever thing you're going to devote your time and energy to. You should not put your dot on something that's requiring somebody else to do something.
Yes, and as I noted, whatever top 5 you land with, we'll put out sign-up sheets for these ideas. So we hope you do sign up. Okay, over here.
I think one of the most important ones is downtown reconfiguration and redevelopment, because it kind of encompasses everything up here. It would help us develop a housing strategy. We're figuring out where houses make the most sense. It would figure out where recreation spots should be that aren't going to be flooded and we have to take maintenance care of all the time. And I just think it like kind of encompasses everything. We need to start with a plan, and then we can focus on which things are easiest to do with it under that plan.
Great, thank you. Who's next? Anyone else want to champion an idea? And you can speak to more than one. We are going to end up with 5 here. So we have a person here.
I think developing and building out local communication channels is really important, because in the neighborhood where I live, in the Harvey's Mobile Home Park, there were a lot of people down below who were flooded who don't have cable TV, don't have smartphones, don't have internet, and don't really have a connection to the information that they might need in an emergency, and that in terms of making that access equitable to everyone, I think that we really do need to look at our communication strategies for emergencies, and whether we use the siren system or other things, that's just really important, as well as for monitoring the progress of floods and potential floods. When water's coming from downstream, upstream, we often are kind of left with just that gauge that's always underestimating by 2 feet, and so the communication about what's happening with the river in times of potential emergencies, so people can plan while you still have the hours to do so, it feels very critical to me.
Thank you. Who else want to speak for an idea or two up there on the wall right here?
Hi, I'd like to put my support behind what was said earlier. When I think of the college, Lauren, you said it beautifully, and then Walter with recreation. When I think of the college, I think of the pool, the climbing wall, the courts, the pickleball, the tennis, the Dibdin Center for the Arts, the theater, and also I think it's like a 65-seat movie theater. And the students who could serve as mentors, we could connect. And that could be perhaps where our community gathers for music, for education, to create, and to recreate.
Thank you.
It's a gem.
Right behind you, Alyssa.
Yeah, all great points. I think the downtown reconfiguration and redevelopment, for me, I want to just highlight the fact that, in my opinion, it all starts with the downtown. That's kind of where all of the value in the town gets built from. It's where all the investment generally will flow into. So providing ways to encourage that investment, find that investment, build out infrastructure for that investment, will, in ways that are long-term feasible, I think will be very good for the town.
Thank you. Who else? Anyone have anything they really want to champion? I saw your hand and then yours in the blue.
Well, I agree with that, but I guess I agree with Peggy also that you can do all the downtown planning you want, but if you don't address the watershed in the river, it'll all flood.
Oh, you could, yeah. Is that okay, Alyssa, if you pass it right there?
I guess I'm lining up with Walter. I think we need to capitalize and increase the recreational economic opportunities, and the reason is that the rail trail and those rec activities are low-hanging fruit for this town. They're really available. There's money available. There's active committee work on it, and it will strengthen startups, the creative economy, and it by itself will help the downtown reconfiguration and redevelopment. It will move where things are possible, and the people are there. They're on the trail. They're going to come actually by the thousands.
We have two, Beth, and then the person in the back there. Hello.
I'm just thinking that, honestly, I like all of what people have been saying, and I would like to be involved in all of it, but I can't. So I think that the college connection is a really important point, because I think that it could actually play into some of the other pieces we're talking about. It could play into the food, it could play into the rec, and it could play into the planning. There are all different ways that a strong college connection can play into making Johnson more resilient in many ways. So I think that's probably the thing that I would land on for my strongest advocacy.
Thanks, Beth. Back there in the corner.
Hi. So I'm honestly kind of surprised that no one has mentioned developing a housing strategy yet. When I think about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, that also, as well as a dry community, like a place to live. And myself and my husband are leaving town because we can't find suitable, affordable housing for our growing family, and it breaks my heart. And when I think about other people my age, that is the reason that they cite for that they've left. It's not jobs, it's not lack of nightlife or anything like that. It's the fact that we don't have places to live that we can afford with the jobs in the area.
Thanks. So some additional thoughts as you ponder what you want to champion. What is most important for the future of Johnson? Is it already being addressed? You could also anti-champion something. That's always fun. But I encourage positive, promote, if that's all. But anything you want us to really focus on, or again, you're going to end up with 5 ideas, which is more than some communities end up with, but felt like the right number for a long-term recovery plan. So what do you think those ideas should be and why? This hand and then this one right here.
Hi, I just have a question how people are considering the first sheet up there, watershed understanding, mapping, et cetera, versus advanced local flood mitigation and restoration strategies. When we go to the next round of voting, how local does local mean? What exactly are we talking about with those two? Because they're either very much the same or they're completely different. And I'm not sure which is the case.
Right. Yeah, so, either I could answer as sort of why did VCRD see some separation there, but I'm more curious from the room, like what would be the distinction that you would want to make here in Johnson, given what we've heard tonight? I'd love to invite people to try to answer that question. And in the meantime, we had another hand right up here. Was it your hand? Yep. And then, oh, great. Sorry. We'll go there and then in the front here.
Yeah, a lot of these, you can kind of see there's overlaps with some of them. Something to think about as you vote the next round is thinking about how we could maybe kill 2 birds with 1 stone. I know in Denmark, they're an urban location that doesn't have a way of dealing with water because of buildings, and they actually developed a system where they could have a green-blue area that could absorb water and get it out of the town. But at the same time, 350 days of the year, they have a sunny, beautiful park for people that's great for walkability, great for people driving through our town, great place to stop. And we're thinking about how we can achieve our goals using one thing to kind of nail 2 things down.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yep. Up here in the blue shirt.
So in terms of helping us narrow down, I think, Beth, it was you who cautioned us about duplicating efforts that are already underway, other people working on something. So not to be negative.
It's okay.
Are there things up there that would be duplications of efforts?
Oh, let's get the mic to you, sorry. And really, that's a question. If it's already being addressed, I invite anybody in the room to let us know about that. Yep, Beth?
There are a few things that happen, and there are other people in this room that can answer this possibly better than me. But there's the rivershed question. There is a whole watershed committee that is happening with LCPC leading that effort, and it is bringing all of the communities upstream and downstream from us on the Lamoille watershed to a central room to talk about the potential work that can be done in the larger watershed, so beyond Johnson. Mm-hmm. In terms of the local flood mitigation, there are regularly town efforts in working with LCPC and other partners on local flood mitigation efforts and things like buying the parcel at the end of River Road West and making that a water shed area that is specific to overflow of river. That project is underway. I think we're in the process of purchasing right now. I'm getting a thumbs up from Seth. So yes, there are things that are actively being worked on, and I think to your point, Peter, there are things that a committee could do or get involved in groups that are already happening, but I do worry about having two groups doing the same thing and getting either frustrated or in the way of each other. Yes.
Right. So the question you should be asking, this happens every time, right? People come up with ideas and we don't know what we don't know about who's doing what already, right? So the question is, there are activities underway, Seth, the town. Would a group of volunteers contributing towards those efforts be beneficial and useful? Would a group of Johnson residents willing to give time and energy, FEMA resources being brought to the table, other sort of resources brought to bear on those activities that would help take those groups further?
I'll give my 2 cents, and then I think Seth really should weigh in on this. But my 2 cents is in that watershed area, it is not a closed door. So if anyone is interested in like what happens or coming along, let me know, let Seth know, let somebody from the town know. Or Alberto, who is right there. Raise your hand, Alberto. Also is a great resource. And Seth is going to speak in a second. That's for the larger watershed. When it comes to the town items, yes, anyone can reach out to the town administrator or to anyone on the select board.
Right. So if you do vote for these or decide not to, again, this is your choice. It sounds like that there would be some benefit to some energy, and figuring out the right way to do that would certainly be, like I mentioned in the first round of voting, one of the first activities for a group that would form, right? Seth, do you want to add some context?
I think that was an invitation for me to say something. So
you are welcome to.
Yeah. I'm Seth Jensen. I'm the Deputy Director of the Lamoille County Planning Commission. As of April 13th, I'm also a Johnson resident. So Yay. This is a nice way to be welcome to the community. So as Beth mentioned, we have been organizing a region-wide group of communities along the main Lamoille River to talk about regional flood resiliency, regional flood mitigation projects. We've also been working to build out a hydraulic model of the river to understand the river understanding, and have received a large grant from the US EDA to expand that up the Guyon and to include more details in Johnson, but specifically in some of the other communities as well. I think where local knowledge could be useful to that project and that effort would be really focused on getting to understand your experience with the floodwaters. When we did this effort in Jeffersonville 10 years ago after the spring flooding in 2011, I think we learned a lot about sort of the unmapped and difficult to map river behaviors. And then that also helped to inform the mitigation projects that came out of that. So that's where I think local efforts tied into that existing infrastructure and that existing of that committee, and the existing modeling could be, valuable. I don't think I'm supposed to do this, but I'm going to say it. I think that based on the process and based on the work that's been underway, the modeling, which is the understanding, and then the figuring out how the model could inform local mitigation kind of suggests those two having quite a bit of overlap because of the background work. And I'm not going to tell anyone how to vote or what to work on, but if you were to vote for this, I would encourage whoever decides to work on the task force to work through that process and existing infrastructure. And also, if you sign up for that, I might ask to look at the river in your backyard.
Yeah, thanks, Seth. Yeah, and I think it was in the Rivershed Understanding one where we specifically heard that people wanted to contribute local stories, and that felt like a useful thing we're hearing from Seth. So, okay, what else? We've got a hand over here and then one up here.
I will also echo housing for particularly the reason I think a lot of these issues are very specific to Johnson, and as many of you know, there is a statewide and a national housing crisis. And the thing that I'll add to that is knowing where resources are for what problems, and the state and agencies, banks, they are all looking at ways to fund solutions for housing. And I would consider this really to be up there with food. And again, it is Maslow, right? So I would really, ask us to look at that carefully. If it's not something that you're concerned about, you are well housed, I would consider looking into the broader discussion, because this is critical, and any community is going to benefit from a bigger investment in thinking about housing and working. I do know the college, the state system is also looking at ways to think about how housing can actually be a part of their plan. So it does bridge that gap to College Connection, because we're not just talking about, individual, owner. We are talking about a larger network. So for those reasons, I would just definitely say that. Now I got to go and put the kids to bed.
Okay, thank you. Thanks. Okay, up here in the blue shirt, yeah.
So when we met in August, there was a lot of talk in the meetings I was in about the emergency response plan and the communication process, and how there was some there, but there were a lot of questions that left people not knowing. And so strengthening the local emergency response plan seems like a really important first step to be prepared for future situations. But I'm wondering if that's something that people have already taken underway. I know the town has an emergency response plan, and there was a lot of talk about different ways that communication systems are being set up. So I'm just wondering if anyone knows if that emergency response plan's underway.
Yeah, have any changes been made or addenda added to your emergency response plan recently? Anybody know?
I'm not officially a part of the town anymore, but not officially a part of the town anymore. But yeah, we learned a lot of lessons last summer. Yes, I know that in talking with Eben, some changes have been adopted, and I also know that a few things in the list of things to consider are already in the emergency plan. They just happen behind the scenes. And also, I would further say that the communication enhancing communications is on my list no matter what happens here. And even though I'm not affiliated directly with the town, I do have every intent on trying to do something about it. Because I think that is the biggest obstacle right now, is understanding how to reach everyone and reach everyone effectively. Because when you try to use all of the channels available to communicate, there are only so many channels, and the people you're reaching in those channels are probably not the ones who are getting the message at all. Like, they either are getting all the channels or they're getting none of the channels, and like that's the thing we need to figure out, and I think that's the part of the communication breakdown, and that plays directly into the emergency plan. To answer your question about the emergency plan itself, yes, there's a whole bunch that has gone into the emergency plan, and there's a difference between, it's called the LEMP, it's what we have to file to the state. There's a difference between that and the actionable items in specific scenarios. And that is a work in progress, and I think that it would be beneficial to have a group help work through that, is my opinion. Communication right now is separate from, sorry, I don't know why that got so loud. Communication, I'm going to just come to you, Kathy. Communication.
We got a rogue mic running situation here.
Apologies. Not actually, sorry. But communications is separate, so I think that there's a difference between building out the emergency plan and all that goes into the communications, but they're very closely tied together, and I would expect that if there are two working groups, those two working groups would be talking to each other, would be my personal expectation, but whatever we all decide to do.
Yep. And do you want to add anything, or does anybody else have something they want to champion +1? Yep, go ahead.
So I guess what I would add is then that this develop and build out local communication channels is in relationship to the emergency plan, and that's where there's still a lot to be done. So
sounds like.
So I'm for that.
I'm for that. Yes, +1. Pro. Okay. Anyone else want to champion something? We built in a longer discussion period because you have to get to 5, and that's a lot to think about, and there's a lot of interrelationships. So we've built in an extra amount of time for discussion here. So feel free to chime in. If you have ideas, something you don't want people to vote for, anything else you know that's underway, or something that you really think is important for the resilience and recovery of Johnson. You are going to get stickers. You will get 6 stickers for 5 priorities. I don't know why. Don't ask me. Because wise people told me that's how many stickers we should have. Okay, we got a couple hands here, right there in the front, maybe? Or, sorry.
I'm following you.
I just have a question about the downtown reconfiguration, redevelopment one. I wondered if there was anybody who could give us an update on what is already going on with that, because I guess I'm not clear about what a task force would do compared to what other town committees are doing.
Yeah, if anybody here has any local context or current status.
I think that would be a village. Sorry, that would be a village topic, and I think LCPC is anyone more than Paul.
Yeah, anyone have any updates that are relevant to that topic? Yes? No? Maybe? Are you, sir, I'm sorry, I shouldn't use sir, I use that sometimes, but right there, would you like to speak to this, or Seth, do you want to say something? You stood up, I don't know, you looked like you were ready to, oh, I thought you had some wisdom. You just have stretching to have, I feel you, man, all right. All right, so anybody have any updates or context on this? And again, the question isn't, is it already happening? It's, well, if it's already happening, would more energy, would more people, would more resources take those things further, right? And we did vet, just so you know, we vetted the big list with the town and the village and LCPC just to make sure there wasn't something that was like way off base that we shouldn't even put on the list. So they did get a first look anyway. Okay. Anything else about that? Anyone have? It sounds like nobody has any local updates on downtown reconfiguration and redevelopment.
I actually have a question.
Oh.
And would it be that downtown reconfiguration and redevelopment, wouldn't that be a secondary thing after some of the other primary things? No? Yes? Beth?
Yeah.
I mean, I can give you my opinion. I think that Adrian had an opinion earlier, actually, and Adrian's opinion was that planning would come before we could planning would come before we would act on some of these other things if they applied to the downtown, which seems reasonable to me.
Yeah, so take a look at your list if you want to remind yourself the description of any of these topics, but particularly this one. It really was about visioning and planning and thinking about different ways that the downtown could redevelop or develop. Yep, now your hand is up. Okay, for sure we're calling it.
So I have a pearl of wisdom to impart.
Okay.
For those who haven't gotten the texts, the bond to matching funds for the industrial park, the bond vote passed.
Okay.
It was 195 in favor, and I think, this is not going to be accurate, 135 against, with one ballot marked, I don't know which to do.
Great, so that's a relevant update and super timely, hot off the presses. Okay, we've got a hand here.
So I'm on the planning commission, and we just finished the town plan, and I asked Paul, our chair, to put on the agenda for our next meeting on Thursday the possibility of hiring a town planner or some kind of group as like a contract position. So I think that would kind of go with the downtown reconfiguration and redevelopment, but we haven't discussed it at all at our meeting or anything. So, but that was just something I asked to be put on the agenda as an update.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that with the downtown reconfiguration and redevelopment, that flood zones and all of that would be considered in that. So I know some people said that, well, why are we putting resources on reconfiguring downtown if it's just going to get flooded right away? Well, I think reconfiguring it and developing it would mean maybe it's not even Main Street or where it is right now. It's moved and rethought completely. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Great. Thank you. Okay, just a couple more opportunities, couple more comments in the back there. We got one before we move into the voting, the final vote.
Thank you, Charlie, for providing the news, and I think that makes it even more important, as my wife mentioned earlier, for us to develop a housing strategy, because this means that ideally in a decade or so, there will be 5 new businesses operating in that light industrial park, and their employees are going to have to live somewhere.
Okay. Good point. Okay, other things you want to champion? It's about to be that time. Do you feel complete? Okay. If you feel complete, that's good, because this means you might get out of like a few minutes early, and it's been a slog, so super appreciate you all hanging in there. Okay, so we're going to start handing out dots. Like I said, you'll get 6 dots this round. What color are they? Green? No. So it is not a one-to-one thing. It's sort of, again, you can use all your dots on one thing. You can spread your dots out. We will tally and then bring out the top 5. Okay? And please stick around for the big reveal and to sign up for task forces. If you did not sign in tonight, please do. That's how you'll hear about all of the next steps. And there was a sign-in sheet going around. Do we know where the sign-in sheet is? Oh, sorry, Lauren. I gave her 2 things to do. We put it away. We'll leave it out on the table. Oh, we could pass it around. Does anyone need it? Okay. Sign in on the sign-in sheet, and we will follow up. You will get a chance to sign up if you don't do it tonight, and so will all your friends and neighbors for these top 5 things. All right. So pretty much as soon as you have your dots, you can start voting. Thank you.
It's all still in a roll?
Okay, Lauren has a box if you have your envelopes. If you're done voting, if you want to take a seat, we'll know you're done if you move away from the wall, and then we can start doing the counting. Okay. We're just about ready. We have a few more things to do, but it's going to happen. All right. I can't do a drum roll. I don't know how that sounds. Thank you. There we go. Yeah. Drum roll on your chairs. Okay. Are we ready for the big reveal? All right. I feel like Vanna White up here. The top 5 priorities for reimagining Johnson for long-term recovery and resilience are enhance and strengthen the college-town connection. Woo! Develop a housing strategy. Bring a grocery store to Johnson and increase awareness and access to food. Downtown reconfiguration and redevelopment. And capitalize and increase recreational economic opportunities. Okay. Awesome. Good job. But this vote comes with some responsibility, right? This is all about what Johnson can do, what you can do, right? So, like we said, they're over here furiously making sign-up sheets for these task forces. So if you see yourself contributing to these things, you can only sign up yourself. You can't sign up somebody else. There's no voluntolding other people, but you definitely should sign up. And like I said, we're going to follow up after this meeting. We'll get the word out to the whole community that these were the top 5 priorities, and here's your opportunity to sign up for task forces. And then we'll come back together. We'll invite anybody, even if you didn't sign up for a task force, you're welcome to come. And we'll have a resource day. We'll have the first meeting of all of these groups, and we'll bring resource providers and start creating your action plans. So that's on October 9th. Okay, I want to thank this room so much. I know some people had to leave, but it was really fun tonight to facilitate, and I just want to appreciate all the energy and really good wisdom of the room. We were just saying in the other room that there's a lot of wisdom of the room that happened tonight. So thank you all so much, and thank you to our partners, Crows, for their excellent, excellent presentation and thoughts. Yay! And with that, you're done. You're done. Have a great night. Bye. Oh, sign. Oh, yeah. And Alyssa's going to barricade the door. You're not allowed to leave until you sign up for a task force.